Ethan had never imagined he would find himself on an alien planet, standing guard outside the royal palace. The air was thick with the hum of foreign energy. The grand structures around him were unlike anything he had ever seen on Earth. Towering spires stretched into the sky, shimmering with an unearthly glow. It was a sight to behold, yet it was nothing compared to what lay beyond the walls of the palace. He had been assigned to the royal security team for a special mission. His job was simple: guard the princess. But the moment he laid eyes on her, it became clear that nothing about this mission would be simple. Princess Alira was everything the stories had promised. She was tall, graceful, and commanding, with an air of royalty that made her stand out even in a room full of the galaxy's most powerful figures. Her dark hair cascaded down her back, and her skin glowed a soft shade of violet, a color that seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. Ethan could feel the tension in the air whenever she walked into a room. She was not just a princess. She was an icon admired and feared by many. The royal gala had begun, and Ethan had been stationed at the back of the hall, out of sight. But his eyes never left Alira. She moved with ease, speaking to guests, smiling politely. But there was a distance. In her eyes, Ethan noticed that she didn't seem to enjoy the attention. She was a prisoner of her position, trapped in a life she didn't ask for. As the evening progressed, the crowd grew more excited. The music was loud, and the palace's grand halls seemed to pulse with energy. Ethan's job was to make sure no one disrupted the peace. But his thoughts were consumed with the princess. She was standing by the balcony, her gaze lost in the distant stars. Ethan had been assigned to keep a watchful eye on her, but he couldn't help but feel something more. There was an undeniable pull he felt toward her, a connection he couldn't explain. He walked toward her slowly, careful not to draw attention. His heart raced as he neared. "Princess," he said, his voice soft but clear. Alira turned to face him. Her violet eyes met his, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. Ethan felt his breath catch in his chest. He had always known her to be distant, but now, standing before her, he saw something else, something vulnerable. "I'm just here to keep watch, Your Highness," he added, feeling awkward. He had no idea what to say. How could he speak to a princess, let alone one as beautiful and powerful as her? Lyra's lips curved into a faint smile. "You're very kind, soldier, but I believe I can take care of myself." Ethan nodded, but he couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't truly safe. As he stood there, watching her, he whispered more to himself than to her. "I wish I could marry you. You deserve someone who can make you happy." It was a soft wish, spoken with the faintest hope, but to Ethan, it felt real. He could see her strength, but he could also see the loneliness in her eyes. He wished he could be the one to change that. It was foolish, he knew. But his heart couldn't stop yearning for something he could never have. Just as the words left his lips, Alira turned to him. Her eyes widened slightly, as if she had heard something unexpected. For a moment, Ethan thought he had overstepped. But then her expression softened, and she took a step closer to him. "Why do you think you could marry me, human?" she asked, her voice a mix of curiosity and something else that Ethan couldn't quite place. Her words were calm, but there was a spark of interest in her eyes. Ethan was taken aback. He had expected her to laugh or dismiss him, but she seemed intrigued. His heart pounded in his chest. He had said it without thinking, but now, facing her, he realized just how foolish his words must have sounded. He cleared his throat and tried to explain. I don't know," he began, his voice faltering. "It's just, I see how hard it must be for you. You have so many expectations placed on you, but you deserve someone who cares about you for who you really are, not just because you're a princess, someone who will protect you. Not because it's his duty, but because he wants to." Alira's eyes studied him for a long moment. Ethan couldn't tell what she was thinking. Her gaze seemed to pierce right through him. He felt vulnerable under her scrutiny. "And what makes you think that someone could be you?" she asked, her tone softer now, almost teasing. Ethan's face flushed, and he glanced away, embarrassed by his own boldness. He had spoken from his heart, but now he wasn't sure what to say. I didn't mean no," she interrupted gently. You didn't mean to say it, but you did. You're different from the others, Ethan. You see me? I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing yet. Ethan wasn't sure how to respond. His mind raced, trying to understand the meaning behind her words. Alira was not just the royal princess. She was a woman with her own fears and desires, hidden beneath the layers of her status. For a moment, the noise of the gala faded, and it was just the two of them, standing in the quiet of the night. The stars above seemed to reflect in Alira's eyes, and Ethan couldn't help but wonder if she saw the same stars in his. I don't know what the future holds, Princess, he whispered, but if you ever need someone who sees you for who you truly are, I'll be here. Alira looked at him, her expression unreadable. And for a moment Ethan felt as if they shared something deep, something real. But then she turned away, back toward the party, and he was left standing in the silence, wondering if this connection was only a fleeting moment or the beginning of something more. The days that followed were full of more official events, meetings, and ceremonies. Ethan found himself assigned to watch over Princess Alira during almost every gathering. As much as he tried to stay focused on his duty, his thoughts were often drawn to her. She was not just a princess. She was a person, a woman with dreams and struggles like anyone else. And, slowly, he began to learn more about her. One evening, after the gala, Alira walked away from the crowd, her face looking more tired than usual. Ethan, as always, was close behind, but this time he noticed something different. There was no guard or servant following her. She was alone. Princess, Ethan called quietly, his voice hesitant. She stopped and turned, her violet eyes locking onto his. I thought I told you, Ethan. I can handle myself, she said, her tone light but firm. Ethan nodded, but he couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't as strong as she appeared. Is something wrong? He asked. Alira took a deep breath, glancing around the quiet garden. She seemed to hesitate, and for the first time, Ethan saw her vulnerability. It's nothing, she said quickly. But there was a flicker of sadness in her eyes. Ethan stepped closer, not sure why he felt the need to push. You don't have to pretend around me. If something's wrong, you can tell me. There was a long silence. The night was peaceful, and the stars above sparkled brightly in the sky. Finally, Alira spoke, her voice softer than before. You're right, she said. There is something. I'm not sure I'm ready to share it with you. I've lived my life behind a wall, Ethan, a wall built by my family, my people. I have no choice but to follow their rules, their plans. They've already decided who I will marry. Ethan listened carefully. He had always thought the life of a princess was filled with luxury and excitement, but now he realized how little he understood. Alira was not just a symbol of beauty and power, she was a person trapped by her birthright. Who have they chosen for you? Ethan asked, his voice gentle. The Prince of the Crescent Empire, Alira replied, her eyes distant. He's powerful and well-connected, but he doesn't understand me. He doesn't care about who I am. All he wants is my title. My people think it's the perfect match. Ethan frowned. He could hear the bitterness in her voice, and it broke his heart. But what do you want, Alira? What does your heart tell you? Alira looked away, her gaze drifting across the dark garden. I want to live my life, Ethan. I want to make my own choices, to marry someone I love, but I can't do that. I have a duty to my planet, to my people. If I refuse this marriage, I risk everything, the future of my world, the peace we've fought for. Ethan took a step closer, his voice low and earnest. But what if I could help you? What if you didn't have to do this alone? She shook her head slowly, her expression a mix of sadness and frustration. You can't change the future, Ethan. It's already decided. My people would never allow it. And even if I did try to run away, the Crescent Empire has the power to crush any rebellion. I would be a fugitive for the rest of my life. Ethan felt a wave of helplessness wash over him. He'd always believed in the power of fighting for what was right, but this was different. Alira's burden was far beyond anything he had imagined. Is that what you want? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. To be a prisoner in your own life, living someone else's dream? For a moment, Alira didn't speak. She simply stood there, her eyes looking out at the distant stars. Ethan could see the pain in her face. She wasn't just a princess. She was a woman trapped by the expectations of her family, her people, and the galaxy itself. "I don't know what I want anymore," she said quietly. "Sometimes I wish I could just walk away from all of this. But I can't. It's too dangerous. My family will never let me go." Ethan's heart ached for her. He could see the conflict inside her, the battle between her duty and her desire for freedom. "Maybe you don't have to choose between duty and love," he suggested. "Maybe. There's a way for you to have both. You could find a way to change things." Alira looked at him, a faint smile touching her lips. "You truly think you can help me?" Ethan nodded, his eyes full of determination. "I'll do whatever it takes. You deserve to have a life of your own. You deserve to choose your own path." Alira stared at him for a long time, her eyes searching his face. She seemed to be weighing his words carefully, as if considering whether or not to believe him. Finally, she spoke again. "I don't know if we can change the future, Ethan, but for the first time in a long while, I'm willing to try. I don't want to marry him. I don't want to be a puppet in this game. I want to be free. But, don't know how." Ethan's heart lifted with hope. "It wasn't much, but it was a start. We'll figure it out together," he said, his voice steady and confident. Alira nodded slowly, the weight of the decision heavy in her eyes. "Together," she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. For a moment, they simply stood there, side by side, looking out at the stars. Ethan didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, he felt like maybe there was a chance for them. A chance for Alira to break free from the chains that bound her, and maybe, just maybe, a chance for them to build a life together. Far away from the royal expectations and the politics of the galaxy, but they both knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. They would face danger, opposition, and a galaxy that was not ready for such a change. But as Alira's hand brushed against his, Ethan felt a spark of hope. And for the first time, he believed that love might just be enough to change the course of their lives. The days passed quickly as Alira and Ethan spent more time together, talking about everything and nothing. The pressure of royal duties weighed heavily on Alira, but in Ethan's presence, she felt a rare sense of relief. He listened without judgment, never expecting her to be the perfect princess everyone saw. He only saw her the person. One evening, as the two of them sat by the palace gardens, Alira seemed more distant than usual. She was staring at the sky, her expression lost in thought. Ethan noticed the change in her, and he could feel the tension. "In the air, Alira?" Ethan asked softly, his voice filled with concern. "What's going on? You've been so quiet." She turned to him, her violet eyes meeting his, and for a moment, he saw a flicker of something behind her usual calm demeanor. A sense of fear. She sighed, as if gathering the courage to speak. "There's something I haven't told you," she said quietly. Ethan leaned forward, his attention fully on her. "You don't have to tell me anything if you're not ready," he said gently. "No." Alira replied, shaking her head. "I think you deserve to know the truth. You've been so kind to me," and She hesitated, unsure of how to continue. Ethan stayed silent, waiting for her to find the words. He'd never seen her like this vulnerable. Unsure, even scared. "I'm not just a princess, Ethan," Alira began, her voice shaky. "I'm part of something much bigger than just this palace, these walls. There's a prophecy. Something my family has kept hidden from the public." Ethan frowned, confused. "A prophecy?" Alira nodded. "Yes, it's been passed down. For generations, prophecy says that the ruler of our people must marry within our species to preserve the planet's future. If I marry the wrong person, or if I fail to marry at all, the planet will face destruction." Ethan's heart sank. "So you have to marry someone you don't love?" he asked quietly, already knowing the answer. Alira's eyes darkened. "Exactly. The Crescent Empire is the strongest of the neighboring factions, and my marriage to their prince will ensure peace for my people. But it's not about love, Ethan. It never was. It's about power, politics, and the survival of my world." Ethan felt a wave of anger rush through him. "It's not fair. You shouldn't have to choose between love and duty." No one should. Alira looked at him, her eyes filled with sorrow. You don't understand. I refuse to marry him. If I fight against the prophecy, I risk everything. The Cretans will retaliate, and it's not just my life at risk, it's the entire planet. My people will suffer. Ethan's heart ached for her. He'd seen the strength in her, the grace with which she carried herself in public. But now, standing before him, he saw the weight she carried every day. She wasn't just a princess. She was a young woman, trapped by a destiny she never asked for. There has to be another way, Ethan said firmly, though he didn't know how they could change the future. You can't just give up on what you want, Alira. You deserve to. Have a choice, to choose your own future, to be with someone who loves you. Alira's eyes softened, and for a moment, she looked almost like a girl lost in a world far too big for her. I wish I could believe that, Ethan, she whispered, but the prophecy is clear. I can't fight it, I can't change it. It's been written in the stars for centuries. I have no choice. Ethan shook his head. But you do have a choice.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not easy, maybe it's not perfect, but you can choose your own path. You don't have to live a life that isn't yours. Alira looked away, staring at the ground as though she were searching for the right answer. The wind rustled the trees, and the soft sounds of the night filled the silence between them. Ethan could see the conflict in her eyes, the battle between duty and desire, between the future of her people and her own happiness. I don't know how to fight this, she said, almost to herself. The Cretan Empire is powerful. They have the support of the galaxy. I'm just one person, one princess. Can't change everything. Ethan reached out, gently placing his hand on hers. She looked up, surprised by the tenderness in his touch. You don't have to change everything, Alira, he said, his voice full of conviction. But you can change your own future, and I'll help you, whatever it takes. You don't have to be trapped by a prophecy. Alira stared at their hands, her mind racing. She had spent so long believing that she was bound by fate, that her life had already been decided for her. But now, standing here with Ethan, she felt a small spark of hope. Could it be possible? Could she have the life she dreamed of? One where she wasn't bound by royal expectations? For the first time, Alira allowed herself to hope. I don't know if I can do it, she said quietly, her voice shaking, but I want to try. I want to find a way to be free. Ethan smiled, a small, encouraging smile that made her heart skip a beat. We'll figure it out together. I promise. Alira nodded slowly, her heart lifting with the possibility of something more than duty and expectation. She had always known her life was not her own, that she had been living for others. But now, with Ethan by her side, she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could change her destiny. The two of them stood in the quiet garden, the weight of the galaxy still pressing down on Alira's shoulders, but for the first time, she felt like she wasn't alone. She wasn't trapped. She had a chance. And with that thought, a spark of hope flickered in her chest. The road ahead would be difficult, but it was theirs to choose. Together, this part reveals the prophecy and the difficult choice Alira faces.
Deepening her connection with Ethan.
It sets the stage for their decision to fight for a future that is theirs to create. The following days were filled with tension. The moment Ethan had promised to help Alira seemed to slip further out of reach. Every time they spoke, the reality of her situation became clearer. The Cretan Empire was no small force, and the prophecy that had bound her life was powerful, centuries old. Yet in her heart, Alira felt a growing sense of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could fight back against fate. One morning, Alira and Ethan were summoned to a private meeting with the Royal Council. The grand hall was filled with dignitaries. From all over the galaxy, their faces serious as they spoke in hushed tones. Alira stood at the front of the room, her regal posture commanding attention, yet her eyes held a quiet sadness. Ethan stood beside her, a constant presence, ready to protect her at all costs. Your Highness, said Lord Valen, a high-ranking official, his voice cold and respectful. The time has come to finalize your marriage to Prince Zayden of the Cretan Empire. The peace of our planet depends on this alliance. Alira's heart sank at the mention of the Cretan prince. She had met him only once, and the encounter had left her with a feeling of dread. He was polite, yes, but there was no warmth in his gaze, no kindness in his words. He saw her as a prize, a tool to strengthen his empire. The thought of spending her life with someone like him filled her with a sense of dread. Understand the importance of this alliance, Lord Valen, Alira said, her voice steady, though the weight of her words hung heavy in the air. But I must ask, what if the prophecy is wrong? What if there's another way to ensure peace without binding me to a marriage I do not want? The room fell silent. The council members exchanged nervous glances, unsure how to respond. This was not the question they had expected from their princess. They had long accepted that her marriage to Prince Xaden was the only path to peace. The very thought of Alira questioning the prophecy was unheard of. Lord Valen stepped forward, his face lined with years of political experience. Princess, the prophecy has guided our people for centuries. Cannot disregard it, not without risking everything we have fought for. Ethan's eyes narrowed. He could see the fear in their eyes, not for Alira, but for their own positions of power. They feared change, feared what might happen if Alira refused to follow the prophecy. I understand your fear, Alira said, her voice rising slightly, but I will not live a life of fear. I will not marry for peace when my heart tells me otherwise. The council members shifted uneasily. They had never heard Alira speak so boldly. The princess, the heir to the throne, had always been obedient, following her father's will without question. But now, she was challenging the very foundation of her family's rule. Lord Valen cleared his throat, his voice growing. More forceful, Your Highness. You speak of love and choice, but you forget the greater good. The galaxy is on the brink of war, and your marriage to Prince Xaden is our last hope for peace. You cannot risk everything for a personal desire. Ethan stepped forward, his hand instinctively moving toward Alira's. But why should her happiness be sacrificed for a future that may never come? Why should anyone be forced to give up their dreams for the sake of a prophecy? His voice was strong, but calm. He knew that challenging the council would have consequences, but he could not stand by and let them control her life. The room grew tense. Council members exchanged looks, their faces hardening. They had expected Alira to remain silent, to accept the reality of her situation, but now her refusal to follow tradition was a challenge they couldn't ignore. Lord Valen looked at Ethan with disdain. You are but a soldier, human. You know nothing of our ways, of the customs that have governed this galaxy for centuries. This is not your decision to make. Lyra's eyes flashed with a mixture of defiance and determination. I may be a princess, Lord Valen, but I am also a woman with my own will, and I will not be a pawn in a political game. Ethan stood beside her, unwavering. He had promised to help her, and now he would stand by her, no matter the cost. Lord Valen, sensing the growing resistance, turned to the other council members. We cannot allow this. The stability of our world depends on this marriage. If she refuses, we will face war. Are you willing to risk that? A few council members nodded, their faces tight with worry. They were afraid of what might happen if Alira did not fulfill the prophecy. The Crescent Empire was a powerful force, and the thought of defying them was terrifying. But there were a few who remained silent, their expressions unreadable. Alira took a deep breath, her gaze steady. I will not marry for the sake of peace, if that peace means sacrificing my freedom, my heart. I will choose my future, not a prophecy, and I will do whatever it takes to find a way to protect my people. Without being bound by this ancient law, Ethan smiled at her bravery. She was no longer the distant princess, weighed down by her royal duties. She was a woman who had found her voice, and he couldn't have been prouder of her. The room was silent for a moment. The council members, shaken by Alira's words, exchanged glances. They had expected her to conform, to bend to the pressure. But now, they saw that she was no longer the princess they had known. She was someone who was willing to fight for what she believed in, even if it meant defying everything she had been taught. Lord Valen's face tightened, but there was no mistaking the fear in his eyes. We were making a dangerous choice. Princess, the consequences could be far greater than you imagine. I understand the risks, Alira replied, her voice calm but firm. but I am willing to take them." With those words, the council knew that their princess was no longer the obedient heir they had relied on. Alira had made her choice, and there was no turning back now. In this part, Alira begins to challenge the royal expectations placed on her, and Ethan continues to support her even as the political pressure mounts. Their determination to find a way out of her marriage to the Cretan prince becomes the focus of their struggle with the council's opposition, creating a sense of tension and urgency. Ask ChatGPT. The days after the council meeting were tense, and both Alira and Ethan knew the situation was getting worse. Alira had stood up to the council, and for the first time, she had made it clear that she would not marry Prince Xaden for the sake of peace. But their defiance came with a heavy price. The Cretan Empire would not stand by and allow their marriage plans to be disrupted. Ethan had stayed by Alira's side, knowing that their decision would come with danger. The royal palace, once a place of comfort and safety, now felt like a prison. The tension was palpable, and every time they crossed paths with a member of the council, it felt as though they were being watched, judged, and weighed. "Ethan, I don't think we have much time," Alira said one morning, her voice laced with urgency. She paced back and forth in her private chambers, her thoughts racing. "The Cretans are moving quickly. If we don't act soon, I'll be forced to marry him, no matter what I want." Ethan stood by the window, his eyes scanning the vast gardens outside. He could feel the weight of Alira's words, and the truth settled heavily in his chest. "Then we need to leave," he said, turning to face her. "You can't let them force you into a life you don't want." Alira looked at him, her eyes wide. "But where would we go? I can't just run away, Ethan. My people need me here. If I disappear, the Cretans will have an excuse to take control of everything. I'll be a fugitive, and my people will suffer." Ethan walked over to her, his eyes soft but determined. "We don't have to run forever. We just need enough time to figure out a way to change things. We can go somewhere safe, regroup, and find a way to stop the Cretans before they come. For us." Alira shook her head, her face filled with doubt. "It's not that simple. The Cretans are everywhere. Even if we hide, they'll find us." "I know," Ethan said, his voice steady, "but we can't just give up without trying. You don't deserve to live like this, trapped by a prophecy in a marriage you don't want." Alira's eyes softened as she looked at him. "And you're willing to risk everything for me?" Ethan met her gaze, his heart full of conviction. "I'll risk everything for you, Alira. I've made my choice. Not alone in this." A silence fell between them, but it wasn't an uncomfortable one. For the first time in a long while, Alira felt a sense of peace in Ethan's presence. The world outside may have been filled with danger, but here, with him, she felt a small spark of hope. "We'll leave tonight," Alira said quietly, her decision made. "We won't be safe here much longer. But if we're going to do this, we need to be careful. The palace is already on high alert." Ethan nodded. "We'll be ready. We won't let them stop us." As night fell, Alira and Ethan made their plans in secret. They gathered what little they could carry, packing only the essentials. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get them to safety. They knew they couldn't stay on the planet for long. If they were discovered, the consequences would be severe. The Cretans wouldn't hesitate to send soldiers after them. Under the cover of darkness, they slipped out of the palace, moving swiftly through hidden passages and secret corridors. The air was thick with the scent of fresh flowers, but it didn't ease the tension in the air. Every step they took felt like they were getting closer to the edge of a cliff. They both knew there was no turning back. As they made their way to the palace gates, Alira hesitated for a moment. "What if we can't change anything?" whispered her voice barely audible. Ethan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Then we'll keep trying. We don't know the future, but we can fight for the future we want." With that, they crossed the gates and disappeared into the night, their hearts heavy but determined. They had no clear plan, no guarantee of success, but they had each other. For the first time in a long time, that was enough. The journey ahead would not be easy. They knew the Cretans would stop at nothing to bring Alira back and force her into the marriage. But they also knew that as long as they stayed together, they had a chance. They traveled by night, moving through remote areas and relying on the few allies they could trust. The stars above them were a silent witness to their flight, and though they knew danger was always just around the corner, they also knew they had no other choice. As the days passed, Alira grew more confident in their plan. They had managed to stay ahead of the Crescent forces, using their knowledge of the land and the help of a small group of rebels to stay hidden. But every time they crossed a border or reached a new safe house, the fear that they might be discovered weighed on them. One evening, as they sat by a small fire, Alira turned to Ethan. "What happens if we can't stop them? What if the Crescents find us?" Ethan gazed into the fire, his face serious but calm. "Then we fight. We won't let them take you. We'll stand our ground no matter what happens." Alira looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. She knew that Ethan wasn't just talking about fighting for her. He was talking about fighting for their future. And for the first time, she truly believed that they could change things, that they could make a difference. "We'll keep fighting," she said softly, her voice steady. "Together." Ethan smiled, his hand gently brushing hers. "Together." And with that promise, they both knew that the path ahead would be filled with challenges. But no matter how dangerous things got, they would face it side by side. They were no longer just running from fate. They were running toward a future of their own making, one that was filled with hope, love, and the possibility of a life they both deserved. The journey had been long, and the road ahead was uncertain. Alira and Ethan had traveled through dense forests, across barren plains, and through narrow mountain passes. Every step they took felt like it brought them closer to their goal. But at the same time, they knew the danger was never far behind. The Crescent Empire had eyes everywhere, and it was only a matter of time before they were discovered. Despite the constant fear, Alira felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: freedom. For the first time, she was no longer weighed down by the expectations of her family, the pressure of the prophecy, or the responsibilities of being a princess. She was simply a woman, walking beside a man who had made her believe that she could have a life of her own choosing. But even as they moved forward, Alira knew they couldn't keep running forever. They had to make a choice that could change everything. One evening, as they set up camp by a quiet stream, Alira sat by the water, staring at the reflection of the stars. Ethan was busy preparing their meal, but she couldn't shake the feeling that their time was running out. "Ethan," she said, her voice low and uncertain, "what if we can't stop the Crescents? What if there's no way to change the future?" Ethan looked up from the fire, his expression serious but calm. "We'll find a way. We have to believe that there's a chance, Alira. We can't give up now." Alira sighed, her fingers brushing the cool water. "I don't know what to believe anymore. I've spent my whole life following the prophecy, doing what's expected of me. But now everything is different. I'm not just fighting for my future. I'm fighting for the future of my people." Ethan walked over and knelt beside her, his hand gently resting on hers. "You're not alone in this," he said softly. "I'll be with you every step of the way, and we'll figure out how to make a new path together. The Crescents may have power, but they don't have everything. We have hope, and that's more than they can take from us." Alira met his gaze, her heart swelling with a mix of gratitude and fear. She had always known that her future was tied to the prophecy, but she had never truly considered the possibility of changing it.
Now with Ethan by her side,
The idea of breaking free from the chains of fate seemed possible, even though the path was unclear. "What if I have to choose between duty and love?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if the prophecy can't be ignored, and I have to marry Prince Zayden to save my people?" Ethan's expression softened. "With understanding, I don't have to choose between duty and love. Love doesn't have to be a sacrifice, Alira. You can fight for both. You can choose a future where your heart isn't bound by someone else's rules." Alira looked away, her mind racing. The prophecy had shaped everything she had known. Had always believed that it was inevitable that her life would follow a certain path. But now, with Ethan's words, she began to question everything she had been taught. "I've been told my entire life that my marriage is the key to peace," Alira said, her voice tinged with doubt. "That I'm the only one who can keep my people safe. But what if I'm wrong? What if there's another way? What if I'm not the one who's supposed to carry this burden?" Ethan gently cupped her face in his hands, lifting her chin so that she could meet his gaze. Alira, you're not alone. Don't have to carry this burden by yourself. Together we'll find a way to make it change, no matter how difficult it is. We'll fight for a future where you have a choice, where your heart is free. Tears welled up in Alira's eyes as she looked at him, the weight of her decision crashing down on her. She had spent so many years doing what was expected of her, following the rules of her royal bloodline. But now, standing here with Ethan, she realized that the most important choice was not about fulfilling a prophecy, it was about choosing her own path. I don't know what's going to happen, Ethan, she whispered, her voice breaking. I know I can't live a life where I'm forced to marry someone I don't love. I can't live like that anymore. Ethan smiled, brushing a tear from her cheek. Then we'll change it. We'll find a way. We'll make sure you're not trapped by this prophecy any longer. The night was quiet, the only sound, the soft rustling of the trees in the wind. For a brief moment, Alira allowed herself to feel a sense of peace. She wasn't trapped anymore. She had made a choice. The road ahead would be difficult, and the dangers were far from over, but she had Ethan by her side, and that made all the difference. As they sat together by the fire, the warmth of the flames casting long shadows on the ground, Lyra made a promise to herself. She would fight for the life she wanted. She would fight for a future where she could choose love, not out of duty, but out of her own will. Tomorrow, she said, her voice filled with determination, we'll take the next step. We'll find a way to stop the Crescents, to break the prophecy. And we'll do it together. Ethan nodded, his eyes filled with admiration. Together, Lyra smiled, feeling a surge of hope. The future was uncertain, and the Crescents would stop at nothing to force her into a marriage she didn't want. But Alira now knew something she hadn't before. The future wasn't set in stone. She had the power to choose her path. And with Ethan by her side, she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead.